Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025, and today we're going to talk rocks in the soil and broccoli. So let's do it. All right, well, happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope your week is going swell. Apparently, yesterday was Earth Day, which I did not mention because I was not aware of it. And also, my job is Earth Day. But I guess I celebrated by getting some more lettuce in the ground, as well as some squash and zucchini in the field. Now, I do not recommend planting these before a frost in general, but we've got plenty of row cover, so I'm not too worried about that. I also planted some sunflowers in there with those summer squashes, but that's not something I've tried before or am recommending. Just something that I thought might be worth a shot. Had some sunflowers ready. Why not? My guess is that the squash will ultimately outrun these particular sunflowers, but you never know. And since the pressure is off this year to achieve the highest level of production on my farm that I can, I'm going to play a bit more than I have in the past few years. It's going to be a mess. But I also learned some things that I will share with you. So I guess make sure you're subscribed so you can be like, what did he plant with those sweet potatoes there? Anyway, so today we're doing another crop breakdown, and I figured that we should finally get to broccoli. Brassicas in general have been a little neglected in the show so far, so let's change that. I will say, although I will save later shows for things like Romanesco and cauliflower, the steps are largely the same, except you can, if you want, blanch cauliflower, if you want to make it really white. We'll talk about that another time. Now, I will say we don't grow a ton of broccoli because it's not the most profitable crop in our world. The reason being that you only get one head per plant most of the time. With varieties like DeCicco will give you like a lot of little heads after that first main head. But anyway, plus it takes up a lot of space, and frankly, it's hard to charge what broccoli is actually worth. It's also a very hungry crop with a lot of pests and diseases that absolutely go bananas for broccoli, which is also coincidentally the name of my improv speed eating troupe. But anyway, broccoli is a chef and market favorite, and it's delicious, so there are reasons to grow it. So let's just go through a few of the varieties to start and how I like to use them. I like the shorter day variety broccolis most in our region, like 60 days to maturity range, just because the heat comes on really fast here in Kentucky. It will be like nearly 90 degrees next week already, or 32.2 Celsius, and could very easily stay that way through the summer. So basically, the shorter day varieties are easier in the spring for us because they grow fast and head fast in the spring before the heat really sets in, and can go in slightly later in the summer, like in mid-August, or instead of say like July for those sort of 70-day crops. And I should say, although I have nothing to immediately back this up, it seems like there are significantly more shorter day broccoli varieties than there used to be a decade ago, which is interesting and also kind of convenient. But I digress. For the spring, I mentioned DeCicco, which is a good one for like one small head and several shoots that follow. That grows pretty fast. I think that first head is in like 55 or 60 days. But it's not going to give you that single large broccoli head you may be expecting or wanting. Eastern Magic and Monty are also faster in production. Will give you one like main, slightly larger head than that DeCicco head. For this fall, or if you have a cooler summer, I like Bellstar as well as a classic, relatively easy to grow broccoli. I also like Imperial, which is a bit more on the heat tolerant side. Slightly longer day. There are quite a few out there that to try as well, and the advantage to the longer season broccolis is that the flavor is often better, which is true of most longer season crops, plus potentially a higher yield in terms of weight. Additionally, I like the one-cut crops like these to be able to spread out the harvest a little bit. So in other words, like you're harvesting the shorter season varieties first, then the middle season, the ones that are maybe you're like doing the 60-day ones, then the 65-day ones, and then the 70-day ones, like spreading out that harvest. And you will remember I kind of do that same thing with things like carrots, where I plant the shorter day ones and the longer day ones at the same time. So I start broccoli in the equivalent of a 72 cell tray. So like, I don't know, roughly 1.5 by 1.5 inch blocks. They are slow to grow, and I will have to keep them in the greenhouse for quite a while. They germinate best at like 77 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like 25 Celsius. And they do that in about 3-4-ish days. In the summer, if I'm growing fall broccoli, I will definitely cover the seedlings as they grow with insect netting to protect from their many fans. And by fans, I mean pests. Even in the tray, they are a target, or maybe even more so in the tray, especially for things like aphids, flea beetles, and sometimes cabbage moths. I like to grow them out to a pretty large stage, so some fertility may be necessary to keep them growing vigorously for several weeks in the greenhouse, like fish hydrolysate. I don't give you recommendations on the amounts of fish hydrolysate because the recommendations are generally just right on the product itself, so follow that. All right, so that's a start. And in segment 3, I will talk about soil preparation and planting and harvesting and cooling them down quick, because that is critical. But first, let's rock. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. I started a CSA to grow food and build community, not to drown in admin work. Spreadsheets, emails, and pack lists take up too much time. If I could spend less time at my desk and more in the field, that'd be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand automates billing, newsletters, websites, and member support, saving CSA farmers 20 plus hours a week. Focus on farming, not paperwork. See how Farmhand can help. Book a one-on-one demo with founder Ari at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Norskgard Farm, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, I wanted to share my dilemma. We are converting an old hayfield, 1830 house was built, with good soil, but oh man, a ton of small shale stone. I could not get a spade into the soil, and when I used a drill with an auger attachment to take samples, it injured my wrist as the auger was stopped by the stones. I tilled 6 30-foot by 100-foot beds, killed the hay, and then used a backhoe to dig down 12 inches to loosen things up. I sifted a small portion by hand and felt like I was knocking on death's door. Smiley face emoji. We planted garlic, amended that area, and it is coming up nicely. So now I believe the next step is to trummel the soil for the beds, not paths between the beds, digging again with a tractor, remove rocks to 3/4 of an inch, replace, then amend the remaining soil. I'm committed to this. I considered adding soil on top of existing soil, but that was cost prohibitive and I could not confirm the quality of the soil. I feel this is a necessary baseline requirement for manageable no-till, and from trummel forward, mostly handwork and tilter. I also see around 20 to 25% volume loss with the shale removal. There is that much, they emphasize. So for carrots, this may still not be deep enough. Still, good clean soil. We tested for pesticides, excellent results, and I don't want to lose that. Brother, what am I missing? Probably a spine replacement. Maybe a lobotomy? Another emoji? Thank you, Zone 5B. Thank you so very much, Robin Felicia Soma, Norskgard Farm, end quote. All right, thanks, Robin Felicia. And also, now, how have we made it this far into this podcast without talking about managing rocks and soil? I don't know. Anyway, I have worked on 2 rocky farms and, well, not my favorite thing. So I don't necessarily think you're missing anything here. Rocks are a pain and the wrist situation is real. A lot of times I recommend getting the extra handle for your drill if you're going to use that auger bit just to save your wrists, no matter the soil, because it's really hard on your wrists, but especially in rocky soils. In my experience, dealing with rocks is basically fine if they are a certain size or in a limited concentration. But once they pass that threshold, it becomes basically impossible to farm those areas without removing some or all of the rocks. What that threshold is, well, that's different for everyone, of course, but also for the types of crops you intend to grow and how you prepare your soil. For instance, if you were wanting to grow crops that are planted relatively deep, like tomatoes, or are harvested mechanically, like potatoes or sweet potatoes, rocks may determine a lot about your production, or if you need to get rid of the rocks. Shallow-rooted crops in rocky ground are a little more forgiving. For instance, our last farm was rocky. Rocky, I guess, is kind of like small bouldery, meaning there were not a ton of like little bitty rocks, but rather a handful of large limestone chunks that I would find, much like you did with the auger, with one implement or another. My favorite being when I would find one with the rotary plow and it would whip the entire BCS tractor into my kidneys. Like just the handle would just slam me right in the side. Anyway, I find larger rocks like that, like it sounds like you are dealing with, a lot harder to deal with than smaller ones. But in that time, I got really good at growing summer lettuce and squash because the rocks were not a problem for those crops that are kind of more shallow rooted. For the deeper rooted crops, I just had to avoid certain areas with certain crops, or I'd get them out, which would have taken serious machines getting involved with a few spots on that farm and a huge loss of volume as you discovered. But for those smaller rocks, I could kind of just choose the bed, kind of like what you're doing, pick those rocks out and kind of carry on from there, even with a little bit of that volume loss, which would have not been quite as much as what you're talking, but there's still a fair amount of volume loss. Generally speaking, smaller rocks are, in at least a small concentration, are not necessarily a problem, and they may, in fact, add a little nutrition or at least habitat to the soil if they are clogging your implements, though the tilther is a tool especially attuned to getting clogged with small rocks. So that, obviously in those situations, you have to remove them to at least a few inches down, but that's going to be your call. And again, depends on what you're trying to grow. On a small scale, assuming that you can't just mulch over top of it with compost, smaller rock removal can be done by hand, bed by bed, with some volunteers and maybe some adult beverages, if that's your thing. On a larger scale, the work will have to be done with some sort of rock removal implement. One option is a skeleton bucket on a tractor. It kind of looks like a normal front end loader style bucket, but like a skeleton of it where stuff can fall through the cracks. However, something like this requires a lot of driving over and over the same farm plots and would likely create significant compaction, and not to mention the amount of times you would have to go up and down with the bucket to sort of shake it and get the rocks, the dirt to fall through and the rocks to stay could really wear the tractor and hydraulic system out. So perhaps something like a continuous rock picker implement, albeit more expensive, would be better in the long run. Maybe you could share it with other neighbors who are no doubt going through the same thing. These are implements that can either pick up rocks off the ground, like off the surface once they're there, or pick the rocks out. It's sort of like as you till, or that sort of scrape the soil surface and basically sift it. These require a lot of upfront tillage and not to mention upfront expense, but will set you up for long-term success where you can reduce your tillage and increase your productivity over time. But yes, rocks can be a massive pain and in some cases may determine where you should even place a farm or garden or what you can do with that land. When I'm evaluating a new piece of property, which hopefully I will never have to do again, but when I am absolutely looking at the rock situation, going out into the field and digging around with like a spade shovel. Homeowners love this, to see what I'm up against. The last farm we were on had spots that were really hard to farm for the rocks, whereas the new farm does not have any rocks at all, really. I think I've run into one. Not even really small ones. But again, some rocky soils can be very nice, like it sounds like Rob and Felicia that you all have. So it does not have to be a deal breaker. And as an additional resource, check out the NRCS Web Soil Survey, which can give you a lot of info about the soil type and properties of a certain property. It's just something you will have to decide how you plan to manage the rock populations without, as alluded to in this question, terminating yourself or your back. Not easy to grow food from the afterlife, I assume, or lay down on your couch, which I know firsthand. So yeah, anyway, thoughts and or experiences managing rocks in a garden, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll finish out that broccoli. BRB. Today's episode is also brought to you by FarmRaise. Still using QuickBooks for your farm's bookkeeping? You're wasting time and losing money. Farm finances can be overwhelming, but they don't have to be. FarmRaise Tracks is the all-in-one tool built just for farmers. Manage expenses, prep for taxes, run payroll, and plan for the future without spreadsheets or stress. Just clear, organized insights to keep your operation thriving. Thousands of farmers trust Tracks to make smart financial decisions all year long. It's time you did too. Use code NOTIL20, that's all caps, no spaces, NOTIL20 for 20% off the life of your membership at farmraise.com. All right, back to the show. Okay, so the broccoli has been growing well in our hypothetical greenhouse and it's ready to hit the field. My first piece of advice is to get some really good compost into that soil where it's going, and preferably mix in a little bit of kelp for the micronutrients. Brassicas tend to love that, but I cannot emphasize enough how freaking hungry this crop can be. So if you don't have a ton of good compost, add what finished compost that you do have right at the base of the plants where you plant them. Preferably, though, you get the entire bed well fertilized with a good, rich, nutritional compost so they are encouraged to put their roots deep and take advantage of the bed, the entire bed. For spacing, I like 18 inches apart, 3 staggered rows on a 48-inch bed, 122 centimeters, or 2 staggered rows on a 30-inch bed, which is like 75 centimeters. Then make sure they get watered in well. In the spring, I would generally recommend you cover the plants immediately with insect netting to avoid flea beetle damage. Though I find in healthy soils, they will mostly get through that issue with relative speed. However, pests like cabbage butterflies are not usually out until mid-May or early June. So just covering with insect netting from the jump can help a little bit with things like aphids, but definitely with flea beetles. And then later with those cabbage worms. Naturally, planting them into healthy soil that's warm will generally lead to the more vigorous growth they need to outrun those early pests. Also, I should say, wait to plant until after that last chance of frost if you can, or plan to protect them from the cold really well. If young broccoli gets frosted, they will survive, but they can do what we have always called buttoning up, meaning that they will start to form a really, really small head at a really small size. They'll do that early, and then you'll never really get a large broccoli off of it. That spread out spacing in rich soil at least does allow for a little interplanting with lettuce, which is a nice way to maximize the profitability of a bed because, again, broccoli is lower on the whole making money or good use of space side of things, the good use of space side of things if you're growing at home. Now, make sure the beds stay well moistened throughout their life. Drip tape works really well for this with broccoli, but overhead watering can be fine as long as you do it in heavy doses and kind of just not keep the leaves too wet all the time because moisture leads to disease, which also loves broccoli. Use insect netting for general preemptive pest protection, and many growers, including ourselves, will use Bacillus thuringiensis BT as a treatment for things like cabbage worms. It's a bacterium that explodes the worms and loopers. That's more or less what it does, but must be sort of reapplied regularly to remain effective. A healthy broccoli crop will have fewer pest issues, especially if you have an abundance of flowers around to support predatory insects and especially wasps. The combo of good soil and good ecology can make a huge difference in pest pressure. That said, I know very few commercial growers who do not, at least occasionally, have to employ BT at least a few times for a marketable broccoli crop, especially in like extremely hot years where the heat stress comes for all of us. As the broccoli starts to head up or right before, a nice dose of fish hydrolysate to the soil, like a fertigation system if you have that, or just using, like a waterer, will help with the yield. As for when to harvest, think of it like this. Broccoli heads will turn into flowers. That's kind of what they are. And so you want to harvest when all the buds are still nicely packed together, but before they start to spread and turn yellow. This timing can be tough, and there is no easy rule of thumb to maximize the yield. It just takes some experience with each variety to know when it's roughly at its peak. But you do want to generally harvest it when you can see the tiny buds, but before they begin to open up. Then, and this is critical, cool the heads down extremely fast to extend its shelf life. Broccoli wants nothing more than to just rot once it's harvested, so you have to cool it down, preferably in ice water, but cold water will work as well. It's just not as good as ice water. Then keep it in the cooler until you are ready to sell or eat it. Most broccoli can store around, 7 to 10 days or so at refrigeration temperatures, with some longer season varieties lasting longer. Now, for growing broccoli over winter, if you can stay above freezing wherever you are growing it, like in a heated tunnel or in a warmer climate, you can grow broccoli all winter. But again, if it gets a hard frost while it's growing, it will button up. And if it gets a hard frost once it has a head developed, it will rot and be basically unsellable. So if a hard frost is coming and you won't be able to protect the crop, harvest it and sell it as fast as possible. And I think that's pretty much it. Did I miss anything, broccoli nerds? I find this is a crop that seemingly does really well in areas with cooler nights, so Kentucky can be a bit of a challenge on that front for broccoli growers, but it's not impossible. Further north is where it seems to really thrive, and I don't think I've ever seen as many long season brassicas like that time that Hannah and I went up and were in Montreal in October one year. It was like they were just showing off. I mean, especially with the cauliflower. It was just out of control, which is fine because cauliflower is the best brassica. Yeah, I said it. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there, but not before we get a quick word from our friends at Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market or broccoli, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Don't forget we are now, No Till Growers is, officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at NoTillGrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help, and the team at No Till Growers for their support. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at NoTillGrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at Patreon.com/NoTillGrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of April, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Isabel Holmes, or Isabel. Isabel is more, that's pretty fun. It's fun to say either way. Henry Walker, Mark Ellenbogen, Colleen Rainey, and Xavier O'Luane. I think, or Xavier. Could be either of those. So this is a collection of folks who live in a dimension that can only be accessed through a co-op in New Hampshire, Isle 5, by a wizard named Razzle Dazzle. Interestingly, Razzle Dazzle's parents did not name him for the musical Chicago. It was thousands of years before that, but I think they probably would have enjoyed Chicago. I don't know. That's conjecture, I guess. But anyway, in this other dimension, everyone, absolutely everyone grows something, because anything you want can be grown. Need a new toaster? In this dimension, you just grow it. Or you can just like trade it to one of the other toaster growers in the area with something you grow, because not all soils in this land are great for toaster growing, kind of like it is here. But the wizard has returned because a strange new blight has settled on this dimension. One we will hear about tomorrow for Thursday. Nailed it. All right, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you then. Bye.